on a scale of goblins? You know, is it charging into a goblin's nest, hacking them to pieces? Is it kissing goblins, even though you still stab them, you give them a kiss? Or is it catching them in bed with a goblin? And then the final scale, you know, is it going to have babies with a goblin and actually help the New World Order and turn against us like Darth Vader?
Oh, Goblin Slayer, you. The controversy began when Crunchyroll accidentally gave the show a PG rating, and some viewers more than they bargained for. In response, some fans called people who were put off by the show triggered snowflakes, and on the other side, they called the fans hypocrite edgelords. So now that the dust has settled and the season has ended, let's take a look back and revisit the anime. To clarify, this is a follow-up video that people asked me to do, and as I said in my original video, I have read neither the light novel or the manga. This is my perspective as someone who is an anime only. I am only judging how the anime presents the story. So without further ado, let's dive into the juicy details. Right off the bat, this show seems deeply inspired by classical RPG, down to the limited spell slots and even the spell names, and adventurers even gain experience points by completing quests. This is essentially D&D the anime, and the first episode essentially functioned as lessons in D&D 101, telling adventurers to get good. Like, seriously, make sure you are well equipped before entering a dungeon and have antidotes and healing potions ready. Otherwise, you'll end up like those noobs. Don't be like them, okay? One main criticism I saw about the show was about the show's villains' lack of complexity, but this is a misguided criticism that ignores the fundamentals of storytelling as well as authorial intent. A story does not need to have a complex or even sentient antagonist, only a conflict. For example, a main character can be battling the elements in the wild, or the last remnants of humanity can be fighting a zombie horde, or in the case of Goblin Slayer slays goblins. That's it. That's the show. That's the whole entire shtick, the joke of the series. You take a video game, and instead of going after the high-level bosses with the backstory or the high-level monsters that'll gain you more experience points, Goblin Slayer instead goes after the low-level enemy fodder that most other players either quickly dispatch or ignore. That's what he's famous for, and that's what people appreciate him for. The story is self-aware and pokes fun at itself. For example, Goblin Slayer almost constantly stays battle-ready in full armor, sleeping and eating in it. When he faces an unfamiliar enemy, he's like, "Are you a goblin?" "No, well, goblins are more terrifying than you." And when he's told about an impending demon horde, he's like, "Ah, yes, but does this involve goblins?" This dude is so tunnel-visioned by his hate for goblins that the Sword Maiden, when she says, "If I have nightmares about goblins, will you come at my beck and call and slay them for me?" And the Goblin Slayer says yes, because he understands the horrors that goblins can create. I gotta say, I genuinely enjoyed that interaction, and it was actually the quiet moments of introspection with the Goblin Slayer speaking to either the Sword Maiden or the Priestess that I enjoyed most about Goblin Slayer, because I found Goblin Slayer himself a fascinating character, and I wish that the show had focused on that, because this dude is so hardcore that he was mentored by a goblin. He hated them so much, and that is almost as metal as the Sanrio film where the lamb is raised by the wolf who murdered his parents.
Shirin became pupil, and the wolf his teacher.
True story, or it was an actual film, and I recommend you go watch it because it's honestly one of the greatest training arcs in all of anime. However, for Goblin Slayer, the rest of the characters weren't so great. The plot was bogged down by a whole bunch of generic, watered-down fantasy tropes who added little substance to the story and instead detracted away from the overall focus. Like episode 5 entirely focused on a rookie adventurer looking for his sword, and granted, the light novels or manga might have done more to show the characters' backstories and make them appear more interesting and compelling. However, within the 12 episodes of the anime, I did not get that here. The most developed thing about the side characters are the women's cup sizes, except for Elf Girl. She's just flat all around, and normally I'm willing to overlook shitty character writing if the animation is quality enough, or the world building is fascinating enough, or the story is interesting enough. Like, it's called Goblin Slayer, right? The emphasis should be on slaying and action instead. Yet, even the goblin slaying was a dud. Most of the fights were unmemorable and didn't include any level of strategy on par with anime like Claymore. Really, the only memorable fight for me was when Goblin Slayer used water pressure against the ogre, and that's about it. For me, Goblin Slayer was like watching a half-baked fusion between an exciting revenge tale, a harem anime, and an introspective dark fantasy, but at the end of the day, it wasn't satisfactory as any of them. It was just meh. Ultimately, neither the story or the characters are compelling enough for me to want to continue on to season 2. I will be dropping this series, but if there's anything we can take away from this slice of internet history, it's this. People are allowed to dislike or like an anime, and if you resort to name-calling and using 4chan insults, it's not opening up a constructive dialogue that actually addresses what works or doesn't work for a show. So that's it. That's my 2 cents. In 2019, let's try to use more literary analysis that's actually focused on the story itself. Let's argue those points, but that's all. If you watch this anime, let me know down in the comments, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Yeah.